meeting to order of the James City County joint meeting of the School Board, City Council, and James City County Board of Supervisors. We'll start with the James City County Board of Supervisors roll first. Mr. Stevens, would you call roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
And Mr. Hippel?
Here. All right, look next to City Council. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I will be calling roll. Mr. Trivett is trying to log in. He was having some technical difficulties.
I'm actually here, Mayor, if you'd like for me to do
there you
it.
go, Sandy. Thanks, Sandy. Go ahead.
Mr. Rogers,
Here.
Ms. Ramsey,
Here.
Mayor Pons,
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent,
Here.
Mr. Maslin.
Here. And Mr. Chairman, if I could, before I lose the opportunity to speak, Andrew and I will have to leave at about 9:30 to greet the Secretary of Health and Human Resources of Virginia at the Visitor Center Clinic at about 9:30. So I apologize for that in advance.
We'll try to keep it tight for you.
No, keep on the good work of the good business.
Thanks, sir. All right, Chair Kelly, you'll do your role.
Thank you, Mr. Hibb. I'd like to call this meeting of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board to order, and as such, introduce our new school board clerk, Mrs. Aller. Ms. Aller, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Dr. Beers. Okay. Ms. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Dowell.
Here.
Ms. Hummel.
Here.
Ms. Zomby.
Here.
Mrs. Young.
Here.
And Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Okay, now that we've called roll and all the present, we'll look to Chair Kelly, if you'll go ahead and lead us off in your presentation with the school.
Thank you, Mr. Hibble. I think the primary focus of our joint meeting today is to talk about our proposed fiscal year 2022 operating budget. And as such, I have a statement I read, but if Mrs. Cook is ready, she can go. Are you ready, Mrs. Cook?
Sorry about that. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As a member of the School Board of Williamsburg-James City County, I acknowledge I have an interest in the fiscal year 21-22 school budget because I'm an employee of the Williamsburg Health Foundation. However, I believe I'm able to participate in the consideration of and vote on the budget fairly and in the public interest. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. As a member of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, I acknowledged I may have an interest in the fiscal year 21-22 school budget because my wife may be an employee of the WJCC schools. However, I believe that I am able to participate in the consideration of and vote on the budget fairly and in the public interest. All right, but sorry that wasn't as smooth as it could have been. We'll turn it over to Dr. Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Mayor Pons, Chairman Hippel, Board of Members, and City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to present a summary of the Superintendent's proposed budget this morning. This budget supports approximately 11,000 students, including pre-K, 16 schools, and 1,700 employees. Our schools are a valued, integral part of the City of Williamsburg and James City County, and you have consistently invested in our schools, our teachers, and in our students, and we're very grateful for your ongoing support. The proposed budget is purposefully aligned with the goals of the strategic plan, Elevate Beyond Excellence. Its key priorities include meeting the needs of all students, safety and security, employee compensation, and most important of all, teaching and learning. In addition, the proposed budget restores the majority of the positions and funding, about 1.5 million, eliminated from the budget last year based on the anticipated loss of revenue due to the pandemic. Our most important resource in WJCC schools is people. Now, more than ever, we need to attract and retain great people, teachers, administrators, support employees, all of whom contribute to student success. Quality teachers are in short supply. Many have retired or resigned due to the pandemic. If we are to attract and retain the best employees, from teachers to bus drivers, we must compensate our employees fairly and competitively and move JCC schools closer to the regional market average in salaries. The budget proposal is informed by data. Senior staff will provide data about teacher salaries, comparative staffing levels with region and peer divisions in key positions, and comparative teacher-student ratios in areas where we have the greatest academic challenges, such as special education and English learners. Teaching and learning is at the heart of what we do. The proposed budget includes $1.6 billion to fund instructional programs, additional instructional personnel, and address educational equity. This includes additional staff and resources targeted to meet the needs of economically disadvantaged students. In response to the pandemic, targeted resources are essential right now to meet the growing and complex needs of students from both an academic and social emotional perspective. Safety and security remain a priority for the school division, with $600,000 in the budget invested in additional counselors, security officers, and system security. The proposed budget will enable us to meet the essential needs of students, appropriately compensate employees, restore staffing and resources to pre-pandemic levels, while keeping the additional funding requests to the localities at the planned amounts in the city and county budget. Ms. Ewing, our Chief Financial Officer, will now present an overview of the superintendent's proposed budget, and several staff will join her this morning in presenting pieces of the presentation. Thank you, Ms. Ewing.
Thank you, Dr. Nair. Good morning, everyone. As you know, state code requires the superintendent to prepare a needs-based budget to present to the school board for consideration. This is a data-driven estimate of what is required to provide the highest quality education possible to the children of our community. Considerable work has gone into developing the superintendent's proposed budget. This fiscal year 22 plan is a balance of meeting established school board priorities related to the strategic plan, Elevate Beyond Excellence, a review of available revenue, and meeting increased student and division needs for the upcoming fiscal year. As you might imagine, the ongoing pandemic is resulting in increased student needs in many areas. Our staff continues to go above and beyond to serve students in both the virtual and in-person learning environments. We are thankful for both the leadership and financial support you have provided to our community and schools during the pandemic, and we look forward to our continued partnership throughout the budget development process. As you know, the Local Composite Index, or LCI, is the state's measurement of each locality's ability to pay for public education. The formula takes into consideration the changes in property values and taxes, the local income and retail sales, and compares it to that for the entire state. Each locality's index is adjusted to maintain an overall statewide local share of 45% and an overall state share of 55%. Much of our funding is derived from a per pupil cost multiplied by 1 minus the composite index. So the lower the composite index results in more state funding, while a higher composite index would result in less state funding. The LCI is supposed to be an indicator of the wealth of the locality. If it goes up, the locality is deemed to have increased wealth and will be able to provide additional funding to support its programs. The LCI is updated at the start of each biennium. Since our school division serves 2 localities, we have 2 LCIs. The City of Williamsburg's is 0.7459 and James City County's is 0.5553 for the current biennium. As you can see on this slide, Williamsburg and James City County have the highest LCI of any locality in our region. Unfortunately, that means fewer state dollars for our schools and an increased dependence on our local funding partners. Understanding that, school administration and the school board work diligently to review data, trends, and essential increases to develop a responsible needs-based budget. Enrollment is a key component of the budget development process. Enrollment estimates drive our estimated revenue and our staffing model. This view provides a historical perspective with regard to enrollment within the division as of September 30th each year. Enrollment fluctuates daily, but September 30th is a benchmarking assessment for funding at the state level. This year, 91% of school divisions in Virginia, including WJCC schools, have seen a decline in enrollment due to the pandemic. Combined enrollment losses in pre-K and kindergarten account for 40% of the state enrollment gap from last year to this year. As we plan for fiscal year 22, we believe the most conservative approach for budgeting is to base it on the students that we currently have instead of utilizing the Future Think enrollment projections. Our current year September 30th enrollment, or fall ADM, was 10,858, and that is what the superintendent's budget proposal is built on. And although actual enrollment is down as compared to last school year, we need to remember that individual student needs are increasing. I would also like to mention that these enrollment numbers do not include our preschool students, which total approximately 395 students each year. This table showing our state revenue comparison includes a column for the school board approved budget for fiscal year 21, or the pre-COVID-19 budget. Here you will see that prior to the pandemic, our state revenue, including sales tax, as reflected in the school board approved budget, was approximately $54.5 million. Based on the approved funding by the localities, our current year adopted budget includes $46.3 million in state funding. The primary cause for the reduction is the 40% reduction budgeted by the localities in sales tax funding. Since there was also some uncertainty early on in the pandemic regarding lottery funds, we also budgeted a 40% reduction in our lottery funded revenue. At this point in the fiscal year, it does not appear that we will see a 40% reduction in these areas. For fiscal year 22, we are budgeting 5% less than the state estimates for sales tax based on trend data from the past 6 years. The superintendent's proposed budget is based on the governor's introduced budget, so this information will change based on final action from the General Assembly. In addition to enrollment data, we use the division's strategic plan to guide the development of the budget to ensure that goal areas are supported. As we begin to look at expenditure increases for next year's budget, the first area is restoration of items and positions that were reduced to balance the fiscal year 21 budget amid the COVID-19 pandemic. All of these items were part of our fiscal year 20 budget and are included in the superintendent's proposed budget for fiscal year 22. Some examples include restoration of the tuition assistance program, as well as restoring funding for textbook replacements and professional development. Here you will see the positions that we plan to restore. It should be noted that this is not all of the positions that were reduced. We reduced bus drivers by 10 FTEs, elementary teacher assistants by 7 FTEs, and central office support staff was reduced by 2 FTEs. The combined total for restoration of funding and positions is approximately $1.5 million. Here you will see the proposed expenditures related to Goal 1, academic achievement, college, and career readiness of the strategic plan. This includes staff and resources to support classroom learning, manage student data, and support our annual computer refresh. Examples of instructional increases include funds to expand an adaptive reading program, as well as funds to expand the early college program and the dual enrollment health sciences program. Other members from our senior leadership team will now share information related to the personnel requests under this goal. We'll begin with Dr. Burley, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Schools.
Dr. Worley. Dr. Worley, you may be on mute.
Okay, sorry. I hit the button, but it didn't work. Let me start over. Good morning. The addition of the 0.5 FTE for the 12-month Health and Physical Education Coordinator was approved in last year's budget. The 0.5 will bring this position to full-time and support the growing needs of our program. This position supports K-12 curriculum, assessments, driver's education, and middle and high school athletics. Additionally, this position collaborates with the division athletic directors and monitors the adherence to VHSL expectation. It is important to note that some school divisions have a central position focused on athletics, as well as the health and PE coordinator. This position also coordinates the Safe Routes to Schools grant for the division. The data on the chart above shows staffing for health and PE positions across surrounding and like school divisions.
Good morning. With the shift of instruction to remote, blended, and on-site learning, the direct integration support that these positions provide to teachers has taken on a new emphasis. Over the past year, the division has expanded to one-to-one so that every student receives a laptop or tablet. This team provides the direct teacher support for instructional delivery platforms to include View, Canvas, Zoom, and others, as well as the addition of OWL classroom cameras and virtual academy demands. The superintendent's budget includes one technology integration coach to support and assist classroom teachers in the use of technology as an instructional tool. This slide shows a comparison of similar divisions and staffing levels for the ITRT or technology coach positions. There is also an IT specialist to support the enterprise systems team. This position was approved in last year's budget. Our enterprise team consists of one database administrator and one user support specialist. This team is responsible for overall administration of our student information system, data extracts and interfaces, user account management and security, as well as support for our building-based end users. The comparison data on the screen shows the number of positions in comparable districts that are dedicated to supporting the student information system. The recommendation for one additional technology support specialist is essential because of the increased maintenance support to ensure continued operation. As mentioned earlier, we have seen increases in the number of devices and systems. Also of note is that as a result of expanding to one-to-one, there are additional support needs in directly supporting parent and student questions and issues, where previously they supported mainly just teachers and staff. In comparing the same date range of August 1st to December 1st, this year against the previous year, we have seen an increase in support requests of over 4,000 issues. Technology industry standards recommend a ratio of devices to technician between 350 to 1 and 500 to 1, depending on the source. WJCC's current ratio is approximately 1,200 to 1 when only taking into account laptops and tablets. This same team is also responsible for supporting other devices such as printers, projectors, and phones. The comparison to other divisions is shown on the screen. Thank you.
Goal 2 of the strategic plan focuses on equity. Expenditure increases here are primarily for personnel to support the division's growing English learner and special education populations. Data demonstrates a critical need in these areas. In addition, an equity coordinator position is needed to support equity initiatives in the strategic plan, serve as a liaison between the community and school division, and develop strategic partnerships to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion. Ms. Bourgeois will now share information related to the special education position.
Good morning. This chart provides trend data for special education staffing over the past 8 years. The addition of one teacher to the fiscal year 21 budget occurred as a temporary position during fiscal year 20, and it was maintained to meet minimum SOQ requirements per our state guidelines. Virginia regulations and the Virginia Standards of Quality establish the maximum caseload staffing requirements for special education services for school-aged children. Caseload standards per teacher or a school average per teacher is a maximum of 20 points, except for classrooms serving students with autism, deafblindness, or multiple disabilities for more than 50% of the day, where the caseload maximum can be 8 students in those classes. As this chart indicates, we currently have 12 individual teacher caseloads above our standards of quality maximums and 6 caseloads at capacity. The superintendent's spending plan also restores 2 behavior intervention specialist positions, which were approved by the school board last year in support of goals 1, 2, and 4. This chart demonstrates that the number of students in disability categories that tend to demonstrate a higher need for targeted support by the behavior intervention specialists remains steady. In fact, we anticipate that this need will increase as we transition students back from virtual learning to in-person instruction for the 2021-22 school year. The work of the behavior intervention specialist will be an integral part of helping to ensure students with these specific needs are not only able to successfully transition back to the learning environment, but also to provide continuous ongoing support throughout the school year. Mr. Walker, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Schools, will now review data related to our English learning student population.
Good morning. As noted in the middle column on the chart, WJCC's English learning student population has more than doubled over the last several years. The current Virginia Standards of Quality requires a minimum of 1 ESL teacher for every 50 identified English learners served. Please keep in mind that this is the minimum requirement and does not take into account the varying needs of students with lower English language proficiency levels. We've seen a steady increase in the number of English learners with lower English language proficiency levels, known as ELP levels, ranging from level 1, the highest need, to level 4. As you can see, 41% of all WJCC English learners are at level 2 or level 1, the highest need. 71% of grades kindergarten through 2 English learners are level 2 or level 1. This is particularly important since numerous research studies have found that students who are not reading on a proficient level by 3rd grade are at an increased risk of not graduating on time compared to a child who does read proficiently by that time. Finally, 28% of middle school English learner students and 53% of high school English learner students are level 2 or level 1, the highest need, a factor which can significantly impact on-time graduation rates. While the standards of quality ratio represents the minimum number of ESL teachers required to provide services for our English learners, staffing at this ratio does not take into account staffing that our level 1 and level 2 students need for increased direct support. The Department of Defense Educational Agency uses a level of need model to staff ESL teachers by assigning weights or points per the levels of support for the students. For example, a level 2 or level 1 student requires more support and would receive more weights or points per caseload of an ESL teacher. Our fall enrollment included 714 students served by 17 ESL teachers. Using the DODEA level of need model, our EL enrollment by need would actually be the equivalent of 1,089 English learner students, a difference of 375 students, which requires 5 additional ESL teachers for a total of 22, which would equate to a 1-to-50 ratio based on a need model. As a side note, I will share that the re-prescribed Virginia Standards of Quality, known as the SOQs, are slated for review by the 2021 General Assembly, and this includes a needs-based staffing model, very similar to the Department of Defense's educational staffing model. This graphic reveals the number of English learner students per each of the 16 schools, noted by the light green color. The darker green color represents the level of need model per our current EL enrollment and language proficiency levels. James River Elementary has the highest EL population and need, followed by James Blair Middle School and then Lafayette High School. As a reminder, the 2020 WJCC English learner on-time graduation rate was 58%, which was a 10% improvement from the previous school year, but it continues lagging behind the state's English learner on-time graduation rate of 73%. In this slide, you can see that compared to our similar and surrounding school divisions, WJCC has a similar teacher-to-student ratio with Hampton, Newport News, York, and Bedford. The addition of 5 ESL teachers would reduce our teacher-to-student ratio and better position us to staff on a needs-based model to best serve our English learner students on a needs-based model. As you can see in the displayed chart, elementary staffing has been based on these ratios for many years: class size target ratios and maximum class size caps. In reality, elementary staffing is actually based upon the class caps and not our targets. Therefore, we are proposing a staffing model seen through an equity lens based on need, which is derived from the free and reduced percentages of schools. Staffing will be done through this needs-based model, and here you will see the class size information for our elementary schools. For schools with a free and reduced lunch percentage between 0 and 40%, we are proposing to maintain our current staffing ratios. For example, the target for grades K through 2 would be 20-to-1, but we would allow those schools to go up to a cap of 23-to-1 for those grade levels. For schools with a free and reduced lunch percentage between 40 and 55%, we are proposing to staff those schools at our current WJCC targets and not pushing those schools' class sizes up to the current caps. For schools with a free and reduced lunch percentage over 70%, we are proposing to staff all of those grade levels at a ratio of 19-to-1. And now Dr. Worley will share information about middle and high school staffing.
Like elementary school, we are recommending the use of the school's free and reduced lunch percentage to establish the student-teacher ratio at each middle and high school. The differences between secondary free and reduced lunch ratios are not as significant as at the elementary schools. Therefore, you will notice there are only 3 tiers and a difference in the ranges. The chart on this slide outlines our recommended staffing ratios and the class size information for middle schools. Like the middle school, we are recommending 3 tiers for staffing our high schools while taking into consideration our free and reduced lunch percentage. The chart before you now outlines our recommended tiers and the class size information for high school. This next slide shows class size targets used by surrounding school divisions. As you can see, the overall 25-to-1 class size target is a step towards the staffing ratios of local districts as evident in the chart on this slide.
In the area of Goal 3, communication and engagement, contractual increases amount to approximately $2,000. There's also approximately $28,000 included in the restoration of fiscal year 20 funding for customer service training that will be provided next year. The safety and security of students and staff remain a priority, as seen in Goal 4. This budget proposal includes 4 additional school counselors as we begin the transition to a staffing ratio of 250-1, which is the recommended staffing ratio of the National Association of School Counseling. Also under this goal, we've included 2 security officers for middle schools so that there will be a full-time person at each middle school. Dr. Worley will join us once again to discuss some of the planned expenditures in the school area.
First, I'd like to share about our need for additional school counselors. By law, counselors are required to spend 80% of their time during the normal school day providing direct counseling services to students. Direct counseling services include individual counseling sessions, small group counseling, core counseling, curriculum, individual student planning, as well as crisis response services. The need for these services is even more critical because of the current pandemic. Adding 4 school counselors is imperative to meet school needs and create a safe, healthy, and supportive school environment. In addition, it is a step forward in lowering the counselor to student ratio and moving toward the required 80% of time spent on direct counseling services. Williamsburg James City County Schools is continuing to work towards the recommended student to counselor ratio of 1 to 250 at all levels. This is the national recommendation from the American School Counselor Association. As you can see on this slide here, with the exception of York County, the slide shows the current school counselor to student ratio comparison in neighboring school divisions. The York data is reflective of the 2019-20 school year. Another essential position approved in last year's budget was the addition of 2 school security officers. This also supports goal 4 of our strategic plan. The additional 2 positions will bring our total for middle school to 4 and give each middle school 1 full-time security officer to support daily routines and to be visible throughout the school day and provide support for afternoon and evening activities, athletics, and events. The chart above shows the number of security officers per school and surrounding school divisions. The chart outlines current data for our regional schools rather than our like school divisions because locality rather than size has a greater impact on our need.
In order to attract and retain high-quality employees and remain competitive with neighboring divisions, the budget proposal includes an average 3% salary adjustment for eligible employees, as well as funding for an increase in substitute teacher pay. Based on the staffing ratios previously presented using an equity lens, you will see 9 additional high school teachers. We have also added 2 reserve teaching positions to bring our total to 4. These positions are used to address staffing needs if enrollment varies from our projection or to address special education staffing needs that may arise during the school year. On this slide, see a much needed assistant principal for Bright Beginning. Mr. Walker will now explain that need in greater detail.
Currently, 73% of the enrolled students receive special education services, which far exceeds in comparison to the 9 elementary schools with their ranges from 12 to 20% of its students receiving special education services. The pre-K program has about 90 employees spread across 5 school sites, of which the principal is solely responsible for all programmatic needs. All 9 of our elementary schools have an assistant principal to provide administrative programmatic support for daily operations, overseeing special education services, eligibilities, testing, professional development, and assisting with classroom observations and evaluation of all personnel. An assistant principal is needed to support the pre-K Bright Beginnings program.
As I mentioned a moment ago, the most valuable resource the school division has is our employees. These dedicated men and women are amazing and hardworking during a normal school year. Add a pandemic into the mix and they go into overdrive. The challenge is to continue to hire and retain teachers and staff members of this caliber, which is why compensation is so important. Mr. Tim Baker, Senior Director for Human Resources, will now share more information related to compensation.
Good morning. Nationally, there's a growing need for teachers and a declining pool of candidates. Fewer people are choosing to become teachers, and many of those who do are leaving the profession after just a few years. The pandemic has also led some people to leave the profession or retire early. So far this year, we've had 47 teachers resign or retire, and 17 of those teachers specifically mentioned concerns related to the pandemic. Therefore, in order to attract and retain high-quality teachers, we must be competitive in our pay. This slide shows our regional ranking for pay for teachers with a bachelor's degree. For new teachers just entering the workforce, WJCC is now 5th out of 9 school division, 1 position better than last year. We still don't see any other significant shift in our ranking until the 25th year mark when we move to number 3. We have a small number of teachers earning longevity pay beginning at 25 years. If you include that funding, it skews the data a little bit by showing WJCC schools at the top of the ranking. But again, only a small number of our teachers receive this grandfather longevity pay. On this slide, we show how we made a gain in our bachelor's entry-level salary because of the 1.5 mid-year pay adjustment. Because of this raise, we are now 5th in the region, a gain of 1 position on our starting pay. Our ranking is actually worse for teachers with a master's degree. In comparison to other school divisions, we remain near the bottom until you hit the 10-year mark, then WJCC is 7th out of 9 school divisions. You see the longevity pay impact when you get to the 25th and 30 years of service. Our master's entry-level teacher moved from $46,100 to $46,792 with the increase of 1.5%. This moved our ranking from 9 out of 9 to 8 out of 9. Thank you.
Moving on to budgetary expenditures related to Goal 6 of the strategic plan, organizational efficiency and effectiveness, you will see approximately $28,000 allocated for technology software program increases and a custodial FTE. Also in this area, you will see the cost for the placement of trailers at 2 schools, as well as increased funding for unemployment insurance and other contractual increases. On this slide, you will see savings from attrition totaling just under $849,000. This graphic shows that our focus is right where it should be. As you can see, 73% of our expenditures are for instruction. In summary, our state revenue increase based on the governor's budget is approximately $6.7 million. The expenditure increases after factoring in attrition savings of $849,000 amount to approximately $8.2 million, which results in a funding request to the localities of approximately $1.5 million, which is a net increase of 1.6% over the current fiscal year. Based on the funding formula, it ends up being an increase of 1.5% for James City County and 2.2% for the city of Williamsburg. For reference, the average increase that we have received over the past 9 years, not including the year that James Blair opened, is 2.7%. This table showing a revenue comparison includes the school board approved budget for fiscal year 21, or the pre-COVID-19 budget. Here you will see that prior to the pandemic, our total revenue as reflected in the school board approved budget was $148.2 million. Based on the approved funding by the localities, our current year adopted budget is $140.7 million. The primary cause for the reduction is the 40% reduction budgeted by the localities in sales tax funding And due to the uncertainty early on in the pandemic surrounding state lottery funded revenue, we also budgeted for a 40% reduction in that funding as well. We are not currently seeing declines as high as 40% in either area, so the superintendent's proposed budget includes budgeting sales tax at a 5% reduction from the current state estimates, but no reduction in lottery funded revenue. This 5% reduction in sales tax is based on trend data from the past 6 years related to actual sales tax revenue received. The superintendent's proposed fiscal year 22 budget amounts to $148.9 million. This concludes our formal presentation of the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 22 budget plan.
Are there any questions or comments from the supervisors, city council?
If I can go ahead and if nobody else wants to start, first of all, let me thank you very much for this detailed information. And I think it is important for us to kind of understand again what the implications of the last year have been in terms of perhaps increasing needs for certain areas of funding. I mean, especially I think in areas like school counseling, I think we understand that there's going to be a tremendous need there. Obviously, a lot of what we're looking at makes us realize that there's still a lot of unknowns out there. What the enrollment will actually be like for the next year and going forward. And so I understand that all of that is very much up in the air. I just wanted to make a couple of comments and maybe requests on these things. I noticed that this budget is, and I understand obviously you had to get started on it early on. It's based on the governor's proposed budget from back in December. Obviously, there have been revisions in that, and now the General Assembly has adopted a budget that I think has some significant implications for schools. Will there be updated information based on that as we move forward in the next month or so? You know, I understand the governor obviously will have an opportunity to suggest amendments to that adopted budget. So I'll just put that one out first, and I'll just put these out because I know that other people will have questions to come along as well.
So John, I can address that.
Okay.
Not sure where the reverberation's coming from, but at the last school board meeting, we've asked Dr. Herron for if there's any additional money that comes from the General Assembly above the governor's budget, that go towards teacher compensation. Mm-hmm. We're in a struggle with other divisions right now that are proposing very significant raises to their teacher compensation. So we've asked them to take a look at moving that to teacher compensation.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. It'd be nice to know where we stand with all that. I understand the state is looking at a 5% increase, which obviously, when you take into account the number of positions we have above SLQ requirements and the other factors that mean that we contribute a fairly significant amount to that under normal circumstances, obviously we want to try to get a sense of where that all is. But I agree with you that you know, this is going to be a challenging time to attract high quality teachers to all school districts. The job is so difficult right now, and we have lost so many people in the course of the last year. I did want to ask if there was some possibility, as these reports are presented, one of the things that is a bit of a challenge to me is understanding the basis on which we're making comparisons with other districts. They seem to shift from area to area. And it would really be helpful to get a sense of why the districts that are being compared are being selected in particular instances. You know, I really don't know that we have a great deal of useful comparison when we look at for instance, Surrey and West Point, and in the same grouping we have Virginia Beach and Norfolk. Why are we looking at those particular districts regionally? You know, in other cases, we're looking at comparably sized districts. I know in some cases we've looked in the past at school districts we think of as having comparable quality. So just having a consistency or at least an explanation as to why these particular cases are being advanced. I understand the notion about the levels of achievement for the English learners, but presumably those other school districts are experiencing similar kinds of you know, levels of achievements, large numbers of students in the 1 and 2 categories. And I assume that the state's SOQs are built on the expectation that there are going to be differences in those different levels as well. Just, you know, again, so just some consistency or better explanation of why these particular areas are going to be chosen would be helpful to me.
If I could, Dr. Blinn, if I could jump in, maybe
sure.
Address some of that. I'm not sure if I know the reverberations there either. Generally, we use peer groups, similar size, similar budget, similar demographics as one comparison, and then region as a second one. Where we don't have the data, we sometimes go out and bring other divisions in for comparison, such as Virginia Beach, because we do draw people from as far away as Virginia Beach in some of our positions. So, but generally we do use 2 specific groups and occasionally move outside of that. The English learner ratio right now is not based on need at the state level. That's something Mr. Walker alluded to that they're going to be bringing into place next year. One of the reasons to really go on the need model rather than the SOQ, one of the main reasons driving that is our graduation rate. We had a drop in graduation rate, and it was basically L students and their performance. And so the extra resources are going to be focused very much on that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, one thing too I would like to talk about from what John said is, you know, the challenge of getting teachers. We have been fortunate, unlike a lot of school divisions in the state, to start every school year pretty much fully staffed. The challenge, which we may have going forward because of where we are with teachers in the Commonwealth, we put out an advertisement for Dr. Heron. Was it 3rd and 4th grade teachers? Now, granted, it's mid-year, it's COVID times, it's all of that, and we got 0 applications. So that has us a little bit nervous as far as how Mr. Baker's going to be able to staff us going forward. So,
and if I could add, Mr. Kelly, one of the big challenges when I did a scan of the Region 2 and asked all the superintendents, what are you proposing for a raise? Everyone was sitting at 3% when we first did this without the final details of the budget. We already know that Gloucester, Hampton, and Newport News have proposed a budget of 5% increase. So already, our data we presented today, we're already, excuse me, going to lag behind in salaries within the region. We will have an updated budget for the board by Tuesday before they vote on their budget, because we just got the calc tool that allows us to put into to work out exactly what our money will be next year. We have that, and we'll have that probably by this afternoon and present it to the board on Tuesday, and that will enable us to know how much extra money we're getting from the state and if we're able to go beyond 3%.
Just had a quick question and comment. The capping of the classrooms and doing so by need, which I thought that was really interesting. And just wondering if you anticipate pushback, because even though, you know, Matoka and Stonehouse, you definitely have a much lower free and reduced lunch. there are challenges there as well. And so, you know, and this is kind of getting into the weeds, but since you brought it up, I'm just, you know, how much of a conversation are you going to be able to have with your principals to say, you know, don't dump, which has been known to happen, you know, every need into one classroom and stress out your teachers there. So maybe that's just more of a comment because you'll handle that. But, and then I just had you know, Mr. Baker made a comment about teachers, and we're talking about people not applying and that kind of thing. Do you have any idea how much of that is money and how much of that is just plain stress because of what's being asked of them to do?
I think basically the lack of applications for the 2 open positions are the fact that most teachers are currently under contract. And we're excited that we were able to fill just one of them this week with a student teacher from William and Mary. So one is filled already with a teacher ready for next year. Going back to the staffing question, it's a good one. When we approached and started to introduce this model to meet the needs of our most, you know, our students with the most challenges, the whole way of looking at it is no one loses. So no one will have less than they had before. The new model will add resources to those who need it the most. So the likes of Matoka and Stonehouse will not be staffed at any less, so they won't lose anything, but other schools will be given more resources to meet the needs of students.
And Dr. Herron, on that, I think that when this was first introduced, it went from 242 teachers needed to 241. So it stayed right in line with what we were already doing. It wasn't an additional ask for those classrooms.
That's correct. We actually we looked at our current staffing and there was no addition at elementary. However, there were positions added to high school. And if you notice the comparison to other high schools, we are way behind in terms of the size of high school classes.
Right.
Can I ask a quick question about the difference between teacher pay with and without the master's degree? It looked like you have a pretty significant imbalance. It's almost like it's being punished for having a master's. Is there any attempt in your budget to try to work that to where it's not quite as divergent from the mainstream?
Mr. Eisner, one of the main things that was driving that most teachers who were hired in the last several years had a master's degree, and most of the teacher education prep programs, they led to getting a master's degree. Because of the teacher shortage over the last year, some of those rules changed for teacher certification, and a lot of colleges started reintroducing a bachelor's degree for teaching. So we see a shift that's going to happen naturally. Because of there is an opportunity to enter teaching with a bachelor's rather than a master's.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
I think. First, I want to thank the school district for helping us launch our regional vaccination site, especially with the school nurses. That's been really great. 4 quick questions I'll just throw out there. Will we be getting an update from the pre-K task force soon? And then also looking at COVID expenses versus COVID revenue, will there be any discussion on how that's looking and how it affects maybe different fiscal years? And will we also get an update on the school year calendar, any changes there? Concerning counselors, understand that especially the need now for the counselors on a regular basis. But we always see the spike in hours needed for preparing students for college and applications for references. Have you seen in any other districts some way to supplement the counselors' need or resources during that period when they're really intensive in terms of providing all those recommendations? Thanks.
I can jump in very quickly. I believe there's a pre-K update that will be going to the liaison committee as well as our next liaison meeting. Mr. Stevens, you might be more aware of what's happening than I am on that one.
Dr. Herron, you're correct. We do expect to have that update at the liaison.
Okay, thank you. With regard to COVID expenses, we are working through how we can use those to supplement what we're doing in the budget. One of the biggest things with CARES Act funding and extra money that we've got, it's mostly for one-time uses and mostly for PPE. We will be using some of that for staffing next year to potentially add additional counsellors again, so that we can provide counsellors across our system at every level to meet the needs of students following the pandemic. And the calendar, we may have an opportunity, if there's time, to talk about that at the end of the meeting and give you a very brief update as to where we are. That's in process right now and will come to the board for their consideration next Tuesday.
Question. The LCI, I've got the report from across the entire state, and I know we don't rank it, and I know the school board doesn't rank it, and I know it's ranked for us, but it's amazing. I can understand with Arlington being 0.8000 and Williamsburg and James City County being 0.5553. But as you go across the map and look at the different jurisdictions, you've got Matthews County, which is 0.5060, and you can go all the way over to Surrey, which is rated 0.8000. And it's so hard to understand their point system and their ranking, because you would think someone like Surrey wouldn't be as high ranked, and we want to be lower ranked so we get more money. And so I'm wondering if this ranking system, I don't think it helps our school systems and our jurisdictions at all. And I'm wondering if there's something that could be pushed through the General Assembly of a different type of ranking system for more of our needs than, you know, what we're bringing in and what our tax values are and that sort of thing, because our needs of our children still won't change. If we have children that are struggling in $1 million house and children that are struggling in a $300,000 or $200,000 house, that child's still struggling. And yes, I understand that communities can bear more, which we do, and glad to do it for our schools. But, you know, it seems like this index is kind of missing the mark, if you understand.
Yeah, I understand, Mr. Hibble, and yeah, the General Assembly has never had the political fortitude to be able to address that, because it would hurt other school divisions. And I could talk about it further, but I know Mrs. Cook gets really excited when she talks about the LCI. So, Mrs. Cook, anything you want to add?
No, Mr. Hipple, I was studying the LCI just this morning. There's one, you know, and there are very few localities that have higher rankings. You know, we've talked to Senator Enrollment about this at length for years, and then all the other members of the General Assembly delegation, and I have been given no hope that it'll ever change, because in a formula like this, if there is change, and I think everybody agrees that it's an imperfect tool, but if there's going to be winners and losers, and so it becomes complex. So I've been given no indication that this will change anytime soon. Just like I don't think the way we levy taxes in the state of Virginia, even though it goes back to our agrarian economy, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon either. So I think everybody recognizes that it's a flawed system, but I think it's here to stay. And I think, you mentioned Surrey, and that's a quandary, but I think the biggest one for us is our neighbor over in York. Their LCI essentially means that James City County has to pay twice what York does, nearly. I mean, it's not quite twice, but that's a shocking difference. And we're the same community largely. So I agree with you. It's very flawed, but I don't have any hope it'll change.
I was wondering if with our school division and other school divisions, we've got a lot of smart people around the table. If there was some way of coming up with a new program of how to determine this and how to make it fair across the board, and maybe other communities as well could put in and maybe get a group together to try to work on how do we change this and how do we make this better and fair for, all the communities across, because, we carry a pretty good burden and glad to do it. But if we can have the state carry a bigger burden, which I think they should, and then, that would help us out a lot on some of our needs that we have right now.
I've also talked to Mr. Regenball at length about this topic, and his advice and counsel, and we've talked about this at liaison as well, is to not go through the LCI and the SOQ, but to seek additional sources of funding outside of those formulas for specific needs in our community, whether it's our disproportionately high number of homeless, or our disproportionately high number of special ed, or our rapidly growing number of English language learners. So things outside of that funding formula where we can get more direct allocations from the state for our unique needs. So I think that's, rather than trying to fix something that's flawed, maybe trying to figure out a workaround. And Mr. Trivett has sort of led the thinking behind that.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Does make sense. I wish we could change it, but maybe in due time we can come up with a better plan and a better way to fund our schools and help with our funding needs. Thank you. All right, any other questions?
I have one. I have one comment. First of all, I agree with the compensation for staff, but in watching some of the previous meetings, why I think the increase is so important, and even more if we could find a way to provide it, is there was a lot of discussion on passing on some health insurance costs to staff, and specifically the surcharge for spouses. Can you just comment on that a little bit?
Mr. Kelly?
Oh, interesting question. Yeah, so if you look at health insurance, across industry, for lack of a better term, has been some moving spouses off of employers' health insurances if they can be covered somewhere else. I know where I work, if your spouse can be covered where they work, they cannot be on the shipyard's health insurance. And they have found that spouses tend to cost more than employees do, and whether that's either way. So one of the ways we have looked at trying to encourage spouses to come off of the plan is the spousal surcharge. So we might look at something different next year, like going to where some of the other parts of industry are going as far as spouses go in health coverage. But we gotta kind of come through that beforehand. So Renee or Olwen, maybe you can help me. Our insurance went up something like 5%, I believe, somewhere in that range.
6.1%.
6.1%. And so some level of cost sharing we think is appropriate with the employee.
I think the other thing we've done, Mr. Kelly, is we've tried to look at compensation as a whole, salary and benefits, and have want to put the emphasis on raising salary and keeping healthcare the same, so that those who don't take the health insurance benefit, and then those who do, can put it into whichever level of healthcare they wish to choose. Mr. Baker's on this in the meeting as well this morning. I know he can speak to spousal surcharge and what that normally is like in other places, as we've done some of the comparative work on that. Currently, we charge $50, I believe, for a spouse to be on our plan, and we're planning to put that up to $75 next year. Mr. Baker, want to comment just on what that's like elsewhere for us?
Sure. When we looked at it and we brought some different proposals, we actually had looked at the idea of a $200 surcharge was not out of line. This is per month. And so when we brought this forward a few years ago and we landed on $50, and then this year with the board's input, we increased that to $75 per month.
Yeah, the flip side of that problem is that we have a lot of our more lower paid employees who work for us only for health insurance. And so by having a surcharge for spouses at all levels at the same number is obviously on a percentage basis more of an impact to some of our school bus drivers and cafeteria workers than it is to our teachers. So so that's why if we you know, we get focused on our teachers, but we also have to look at our entire workforce. So if we flip over to, you know, if your spouse can be covered somewhere else, that might help us when we go to the market for getting rate changes. So those are things that we're thinking about strategically going forward.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, when we talk about a raise, because we are passing on a significant portion of the healthcare increase to employees, the increase in salary is not as big as it looks.
That's actually the point I wanted. It doesn't look as big as with the passing on of the health insurance costs.
If we say 3%, it's really not a 3% if you're carrying healthcare.
Any other questions?
No, I was just going to make a comment that healthcare costs, though, are going to go up for us as well. I mean, healthcare is expensive, and $75, while expensive, and you're right about, you know, and we'll have the same issue from to admin, that it's still much cheaper than trying to buy off the mark, so to speak, and going without. So
yes,
appreciate those efforts.
Can I just ask a quick question about, especially at the elementary school level, where we stand in terms of the target versus the cap overall in terms of our classes, and just as a side note to that, obviously there's one school, one elementary school that stands out in terms of you know, free and reduced lunch, and that's James River Elementary. And at some point, I'd really like to have the opportunity to sit down with some folks in the schools to talk a bit about what strategies might be pursued to help James River both get a more robust enrollment and to increase the economic mix of students in that particular enrollment zone. But I'm curious about the relationship to the target versus the cap. Are we at the target in most cases, or are we at the cap in some of these places?
I'm going to ask Mr. Walker to come on and answer that, because he's very familiar with each of the elementary schools. But my understanding is that we've been operating mostly at the cap rather than at the target.
Dr. Heron, that's correct. We are mostly operating at the cap across the board.
And that is more than other school systems, because when more schools come into a zone, more students come into a zone school, and we take every student who comes our way and wants to come to us, then as the school becomes full, the classes become bigger. So Matoka, Stonehouse, Matthew, Whaley, Norge are all either 100% or heading towards it. So we can't avoid high class size because there's no space.
Yeah, that's right. We start running out of classrooms in schools too.
Any other questions? All right, let's move into return to learning discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hipple. You know, we don't have a formal presentation here, but we thought it was pretty important to update the board update the funding partners on where we are as far as return to learn and what our strategy is going forward. It's interesting that, you know, 1 year ago today, I was in Dr. Heron's office, and she told me she just wanted to get to spring break. We just want to get to spring break. And then little did we know that the next morning, Dr. Heron would close all the schools because of some COVID exposure, and two hours later, the governor closed the entire state. And, it has certainly been a tremendous year. A year ago, I had told you Zoom is what the sound of a car makes when it passes by you. And the only masked men I knew were the Lone Ranger and Zorro. And here we are a year later. So, but while our school buildings were closed, our teachers were working hard, our students are working hard, our parents are working hard, and our administration was certainly working hard. And teaching and learning was happening. It wasn't happening as well as for some students as well as it could have. But we were still teaching and learning. We've taken strides to open our buildings and return students to the classrooms, which Dr. Herron will share with you in a minute. There are a couple of school systems in the region who might be a little bit ahead of us. There are several school systems who are behind us. Judging by email and comments, which I've received, and I think most of the school board members at least, and probably some of you guys, there are some folks who think we are moving too slow, and about an equal number of people who think that we're moving too fast. It comes both ways. But I can tell you throughout all of this, we have made the best decisions we could in the interest of students, teachers, and our community. Can we be second guessed? Sure. That's just, it's just the nature of the business, nature of our job. But every decision we've made, we've done it with much consideration and much thought, and doing it the best we can. As was mentioned earlier, I would like to say thank you to both James City County and the City of Williamsburg for being incredible partners with us, especially during the pandemic, especially with the vaccine clinics. Those clinics were critical to increase our ability to staff schools and bring students back for in-person learning. And I will say that the efficiency of that process was amazing. And the folks who were working there and delivering the vaccines and organizing it, that was just completely awesome. And I have heard nothing but great things, and I can say nothing but great things about how that whole process worked. We got just over 80% of our staff fully vaccinated. I know Dr. Herron has to leave at 10:30 because she wants to get her second vaccine. So we got to be kind of quick with this. But we want to thank you for your collective commitment to making them a priority. And thank you all of you for helping to get that done. The school division is calling the vaccine the shot of hope. I also think think of them as a shot of help, and it really helped our staff to come back to our buildings with some confidence. And as a result of that, we are changing some of our protocols for staff members who are fully vaccinated, that they will no longer need to be quarantined if they're exposed to COVID-19, which should lead to fewer interruptions to teaching and instruction. So as you'll hear from Dr. Herron, we're in a good place right now in terms of operating with the CDC guidelines. We do have cases. There is some, we're having those issues, but we're looking forward to a time when we can have students spend even more time in our building. We're looking forward to a time when we can meet together again for musicals and plays and orchestra concerts and football games and athletics. And we're gonna, we're keeping moving in that direction. Good to see the numbers moving in the same direction to help us with that too. But I want to thank all of you for the continued partnership throughout all of this, both financial and moral support and everything you've done for us. So I just want to say I appreciate that on behalf of the school board and the school system. So Dr. Herron, you want to take us through where we are and what we're doing?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what's our status today? Mr. Kelly's already alluded to some of it. Basically, all students who want to be learning in person have the opportunity to do so right now in a hybrid model. 2 days a week on site and 3 days remote for elementary. Instruction is happening 5 days a week. Athletics are up and running with a limited number of spectators in the stands for safety reasons. Elementary have been in hybrid mode now for 4 weeks. High school and middle school for 2 or 3 weeks, depending on the grade level. There is an impact, of course, to bringing students back into the building, especially at the high school level. So far, we have students with COVID-19, 3 at elementary, none at middle school, and 10 at high school. And 3 of those are connected with athletics. There's also a number of staff members who have identified with COVID since we reopened as well. On top of that, we have about 95 students in quarantine as of today because they've been in close contact with a classmate, a teammate, or a family member who has COVID. So there's this ongoing balance in trying to keep students safe while having them in the building. Plans are already well underway for summer school to remediate students. Boot camps, tutoring, summer school plans focused on the basics and remediation to get students back on task. And we're going to present some of that at next week's board meeting as well. Overall, things are going well, and the exciting thing is to see buses running across the county and to see students in the classroom and enjoying being with their friends and learning again. So that's our current status. The big question, of course, is where do we go from here? And obviously, we want to take the next step forward. As Mr. Kelly alluded to, the data is in our favor right now. It keeps going down. We are incredibly encouraged by it. We feel we should be able to make another step of progress fairly soon. We are in hybrid form right now. CDC guidelines says 6 feet when we're in substantial transmission, which is where we are right now as a community. As the data continues to improve, we want to move forward. And one of the things just this week, 2 days ago, guidelines came out from the Virginia Department of Education and the Virginia Department of Health that puts an emphasis of physical distance between 3 and 6 feet. And at the board meeting on Tuesday, we'll have our health experts from the community presenting some of the research behind reducing the distance while we layer all kinds of other strategies to keep students and staff safe. At the moment, if we were to move, speaking of elementary first, of course, because they're always go first because of the most vulnerable students. If we were to have 3 feet physical distance, currently we have 40 classrooms across 8 elementary schools that will struggle with 3 feet of distance. 20 on the good side, that's 26%. We have 171 classrooms. So there's a significant number that we could walk right in now and keep a 3 foot distance and begin to have more school on site. Excuse me. This year we are fortunate in some ways that we have 1,000 students still in virtual learning. So we do have some space in our schools, which gives us some opportunities there. The last thing we want to do is to split classes in the last 9 weeks of school, because a teacher's built a relationship with students. It would be very difficult to do that just to get to 3 feet to get everyone back in the buildings. But we're looking at transportation. We have logistical issues there, keeping students even 3 feet apart. So we're looking at the guidelines there again. At the moment, we deliver lunches to the classrooms in the hybrid model. Once we bring all students back into the classroom, that's going to be much more challenging. We're going to have to probably deliver some and have some in the cafeteria. We're working through what that would look like right now. The logistics everywhere to work through. Having said all of that, I believe we can do it. And we're going to present to the board on Tuesday night some of the ways that we're going to move forward safely for students and for teachers. Secondary, the next phase we look at for them, I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but when we offered the opportunity for secondary students to come back on site for those who wish to, in addition to the over 1,000 who have been remote and will stay remote all year in the virtual academy, we actually had 1,000 students who chose not to come back on site. And so we're working with relatively manageable numbers now in our high school and middle school classrooms. However, in the last 9 weeks, we have promised families to have the opportunity to re-choose whether they want to be virtual or on site. Regardless of where they're learning at middle and high school, they have 4 days a week synchronous learning through the new technology that we have in every secondary classroom due to CARES Act funding. You know, our biggest challenge is we're trying to move in the fourth 9 weeks just to We feel it's the right time because of the data, and we feel it's the best thing for students, even though it's going to be a challenging move. Our bigger challenge is to think about next year. We've had some conversation today about class size and the fact we have all our mini classes in 4th and 5th grade, especially at a cap of 28 or 29 students in some of our schools. If all 1,000 virtual students come back into the elementary, and if students come back, which I really believe we will once we take another step forward for the last 9 weeks, then we're going to need space. And we're going to really be asking you to partner with us to create some of that space through trailers at many of our elementary schools. We're working through some issues right now. There's 2 trailers in the budget, which we're going to create space at James River and Norge due to our new ratio of class size based on free and reduced lunch. We have, I think, 8 out of the 9 elementary schools are going to need additional classroom space and additional teachers. We are looking at CARES Act funding for some of that to fund additional teachers and space for the next year. If we can choose to plan nothing, and we can't guarantee getting everybody back 5 days a week, or we can choose to make plans now to make sure we get there. And so we're in that process and really need you to partner with us as we work out and finalize the numbers probably next week as to the number of trailers we might need. We believe we can do all of that without asking for additional funds from the localities next year and stick with what's in your budget right now. That's just a brief overview. Challenging, but we know we can do it for students.
Mr. Kelly, if I could speak just for a second about the resiliency of our students.
Yeah, sure. I was on mute. Sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Kelly. As we spoke about what this last year has looked at, I had an opportunity to meet with our student advisory committee a few weeks ago, and I shared this at one of our last school board meetings. But I asked our students, recognizing how challenging online learning has been, were there any upsides at all? And I was pleased to hear from representatives from all 3 of our high schools speak to the fact that they've been able to build close relationships with their teachers. So even though it has been online for most of the year, we've now moved into hybrid, but at the time, our high school students weren't experiencing the hybrid option. But because they're texting their teachers and emailing their teachers and meeting with them in a more intimate way, face-to-face in the computer, they felt like they knew who their teachers were and they had a better and different relationship than in the past. The students also spoke about the ability to develop time management skills. And so many of those students did have an opportunity to experience asynchronous as well as synchronous learning. And so those students spoke about the fact that they could self-pace and they were pleased with how they had learned to align all their studies and meet deadlines. They also spoke about the increased communication skills. And so they felt like because they were texting and calling and emailing, they had increased those communication skills as well as technology skills. They'd all had learned Zoom, and they were also able to be a technical assistant to many of their teachers and help their teachers improve their technology skills. And so I asked those students, what do you think you're going to do with these skills moving forward? And they all said, we're going to use these, you know, when we go to college, when we join the military, when we get our next job. And so I think while it has been a difficult year, and certainly online instruction has been hard for many of our students, there has been some upsides. And I just wanted to share the fact that our students are resilient. And I think next year we'll look back on this experience and we'll still be able to take a lot from that that will help us as we move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Owenby. Any questions or comments?
Thank you so much for the update. I really appreciate it. What a strange year it has been. I would say that we do get a lot of comments. We also have done, I think, a fairly good job of saying, go talk to the school board. But that said, I mean, we got railed Tuesday night about, you know, this whole situation. So people do come to this board and want to say a comment. I was wondering if you could tell me when students are in the classroom, when they are returning to the classroom, is the technology kind of like they've had so much saturation of technology at home? Is that being put away when they're back in the classroom? And what role is technology playing? I mean, I know there's technology in schools, but are they using their tablets in school, or are they having more of a relationship with the teacher at that juncture?
Ms. Larson, Greg Dowell here. I can perhaps give you the perspective from my household, my two children that I've got three, in fact, but one in middle school, one in high school. And it's kind of a mix from what I'm getting from mine. It really depends on how the teacher chooses to engage synchronously with those that are also at home. So some will have the student in person use that laptop and in the classroom and view slides and presentations that those that are at home are also viewing at the same time. And then other teachers will have them put it away and view it on the blackboard. That's what I've seen. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms. Larson, if I could add to that, we have put technology called an OWL in every classroom, and it's a device, a camera that follows the teacher around the classroom. So students sitting at home feels like they're in the classroom. The sound is really good. And so the teacher is literally teaching to those on Zoom, and it's those in the classroom at the same time. And that's how we've been able to keep teaching and learning going asynchronously 4 days a week for high school and middle school students.
And I can also tell you that, this has changed the way we're going to deliver education going forward. In my role at New Horizons, some of the feedback we've gotten is that the governor's school actually liked virtual better, because particularly for our students, they don't have to be on a bus for an hour going down to Hampton for class. And so one of the things New Horizons is looking at doing is doing more virtual and then bringing the students down there for labs once we go back, which would do a couple of things that allow our kids to get a couple extra hours of sleep every night. And it also could help us to expand the enrollment at the governor's school, because we would have fewer resource issues with classrooms and such in Hampton, and only have lab issues that have them down there for labs. So it's this has forced us to change the way we work, change the way we play, the way we do education. I mean, this is going to have impacts going forward, and so we're never going to do education like we did on March 12th, 2020.
Jim, hey, this is great information. I think it'd be helpful from maybe a public relations standpoint, to communicate this out to the community. You'll see in the last word tomorrow a negative comment in terms of students returning to the classroom and the teachers going on as normal, sort of almost suggesting ignoring the students that are in class. So I think if we can come up with some positive PR, that might be good.
Yeah, it's hard to keep negative things out of the last word. So, there's only so much we can control there. But, and a lot of this too is also maturing and developing as we go forward into the planning for next year. And as we get kids in classrooms and teachers adjust to learn how that happens, and students just learn how that happens, the paradigm's gonna shift slightly as we go.
Yeah,
Mr.
let's
Kelly,
start with making the last word non-existent. That's what we need. That's the kind of PR campaign we need to start.
That was said by Mrs. Larson and not by anybody else. Ms. Ellenby?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Kelly. If I could just add one more example. I know staff have presented at our board meetings. One additional way we can use this technology going forward is that heretofore, certain high school classes, let's say it was German 5, students at Lafayette may have wanted that. The class didn't make, but it made it Jamestown. And so those students then would have to make the decision to split their day, half at Jamestown, half at Lafayette. But now with this OWL technology, the possibility could be that they could stay at Lafayette, if you will, and then Zoom in virtually to that class at Jamestown. And so there are those kinds of options that our building administrators could be able to work through and could potentially offer students more options with regard to scheduling.
and make scheduling that much more complicated, because now you're not only doing it at a school, you're doing it across 3 schools. So Dr. Worley's job didn't get easier for that, but so.
Chairman Kelly, question
Yes,
or a comment. I know that, I still have 3 left in school, and I can't say enough about how the teachers have worked very hard to make sure that this was as smooth as possible. So credit to the teachers and all their hard work of trying to figure out, what do we do now, and what do we do? How do we fix this? How do we do the Zoom? How do we make sure all the students are on? And I've been able to sit in on some of the classes and just listen to it and what's going on and that sort of thing. And it's gone very well. And, there's been highs and there's been lows, which with this, there would be. You would expect that. And but I think I'll be glad to see when we're totally out of it. And I've got some of my children that love the Zoom, and it gives them more ability to do other things and get things done and multitask. Some of them like the in-person. So I think it's going to give us a chance in the long run to develop schools in a different way than we used to do it when we were growing up. And I think this will enhance the school experience in the long run. And I also want to say hats to your IT group. We've had a few computer issues, and I mean, just like that, call up, hey, I can fit you in at 10 o'clock. Can you be here? Go there, take care of it. Couldn't ask for a seamless way of taking care of things. So let your staff know they've done an excellent job there for us, and I'm sure for the community as well. And we had 2 computer snafus, and they were fixed immediately. And some of them were replacing, and couldn't say enough about them. So hats off to them. If you'll let them know, kudos to staff on that.
Yeah, Mr. Landers and his team have done a wonderful job. And we as we come into our board meetings at the annex, I mean, there have been boxes and boxes of technology and computer stuff, and it's like, man, how are you guys going to deal with all this? And they've done a tremendous job. But as far as when we're going to get through all this, as Dr. Heron mentioned, we still have cases, we still have things going forward, and this is going to be with us for years. I mean, it's going to be, we deal with measles every year. We deal with all kinds of viruses and bacteria and stuff in our schools, and this is going to be one of those things. And so we're just going to have to learn how we work our way through it, and how we manage our way through it, and how we keep going forward. So, this is not going to be over by the 4th of July or any other day that somebody puts on a calendar. We're going to have to be dealing with this as we move forward. So,
can I also add that I think we're going to have to ask the community for additional patience as we move into the fall. These the arrangements that are being asked of our staff and our administrators, what they're doing right now, planning to go back, the 4 days a week and then to a 5-day a week. It is unbelievably complex, and it's unbelievably complex, followed by over, or at this point, a year of exhausting work to teach in a virtual academy, or for a teacher setting up a virtual academy and trying to meet the needs of everybody, and being so worried and concerned about the ones we're losing. It has been a really stressful year for our teachers and our administrators. And I just wanted to ask the community and all of us here to just remain patient and civil and supportive of our school system. I also just wanted to throw out a really nice thank you to the city of Williamsburg for the possibility of a tax increase to go along with supporting the school system. So that's my just plea for civility and patience as we move forward.
So it's not to rush anybody and close this out, but I need to get Dr. Heron into the vaccine in her arm. I will say on behalf of the school board, and I think I can probably speak for all of the elected bodies here, we are very fortunate to have Dr. Heron and her team here and help us guide us through this. The team that she's put together it's unbelievable how much they have had to work and the successes that they have accomplished. We talked about Mr. Landers. That can go everywhere to Mr. Baker in HR. It can go to Mr. Walker, Dr. Worley. It's Mr. Keever. I mean, we are very fortunate as a community to have those leaders in our school system to help us work through these issues. I think all of us have all done our own version of Monday morning quarterback in some of the decisions that were made. But they've just done a tremendous job. And I just want to make sure that they hear our thanks for all the work that they have done. And they have done an astounding amount of work over the past year. And I'm just very appreciative of that. So anyway.
All right, Mr. Kelly, I'm gonna look for you to adjourn your school board, and then I'll go to the city, and then we'll be the last on James.
Roger that. I'm going to dismiss Dr. Herron to go get her shot. And without objection, the Williamsburg James City County School Board is adjourned.
Thank you. City Council?
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I was going to move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Ms. Felico, are you still here?
Barbara, you want to vote?
Miss.
I'll call the roll. Vice Mayor Dent,
Aye.
Mr. Maslin,
Aye.
and I say aye too. And goodbye.
Goodbye. All right, for James City County, we'll look for an adjournment to 1 p.m. on March 23rd, 2021 for a business meeting. And I'll go ahead and have the motion. And Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please, sir?
Yes, sir. Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye. All right, meeting adjourned. Y'all be safe out there today, and thank you and all the information and each of you joining us. Have a good day.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys.